Look, first of all, thank you. And it's good to be able to talk to you about this stuff as well. Mate, it's exciting. One of the big things that I've realized is that there's not enough celebration, particularly about the work that's being done around the media sides of things and partnerships. And I think you guys do a fantastic job. We're actually a former silver winner from the Global and APAC, which is nice. From some of the work we did actually with McDonald's, which is repping the brand still. But it was really good to be able to have a look through and help recognize really great work that's being done. And, you know, a lot of our job is also disseminating good from bad, like what are good opportunities within markets, you know, specifically in gaming and eSports. And I thought we could take that knowledge and help apply it to campaigns that we've seen to make sure that certain brands and certain companies that are doing fantastic work get that recognition. So excited to be part of it. Well, I'd love to say it was my charm and knocking at doors, which is a little bit part of it. No, it's mate, it's become undeniable. It's because it's become now the biggest entertainment segment. So when you just look at the audience sizes, particularly like, you know, in markets down here in APAC, you've got like 70% of people, all people play video games. In America, I think it's something around the 62-63% mark, which is just enormous numbers. So it's come that point where I guess I would say, being honest, brands were very resistant. So it's not something that brands really wanted to get into. It became so undeniable for them that they had to turn around and go, we need to start looking at this sector. And then there's also some passionate CMOs that, you know, 6-7 years ago, or maybe even a little bit more, realized the opportunity here. And then they started to get into the space. And the results that they've gotten, again, has become a bit undeniable for a lot of other brands to look at it and start to see this is a space that we've got to play in. And I think particularly when you see the sales and the number of money, how much money certain categories and certain brands are getting, it was just too appetizing. And so now we've been going through the discovery and testing phases, I think, the last few years, and it's now gotten very much more cemented as a key kind of channel or vertical for brands, which is exciting, particularly for us. So a lot of what I do is being a bit of a mouthpiece for the industry, particularly with brands. I'm the one who gets wheeled in to talk to CMOs, and then sometimes CEOs who still don't want to believe the numbers and the things that they're seeing. So a lot of our job is that education and explaining to it from a brand marketing perspective as well. Like, I think a lot of the times when you've seen the way that gaming is being presented to brands, it's more from a consumer point of view. It's like, oh, do you know how many people play this game and things like that? And it's not been that relevant. What we do is we kind of change that a bit to say to them, okay, guys, like, this is how it is relevant for you as a brand. This is where you can play and this is where you can't. Pun kind of intended there. But that enables us to then say to these different brands, like, okay, well, I know you have these reservations. Once we've dispelled these myths, then how do you practically pull it together? And gaming is super fragmented. It's one of the reasons it's got so much success is there's millions of independent groups out there and companies that are building their own ecosystems, and it forges together to create this massive arena and this massive audience. But if you're a brand, it's very confusing. It doesn't work like traditional sports. It doesn't work like music and movies, but it's bigger than all of them. Like, so what's the brand supposed to make sense of it? So that's one area, but it actually gets down to a point where, because of that, there's a lot of opportunity too. And there's a lot of ways that brands can enter into it. And you saw that, like, test and learn, where the last few years brands have kind of dipped a toe, and even ones that haven't done it really perfectly have still seen a really good result. So they're turning around going, okay, well, look, if this was what I got out of that, how do I build it bigger? The problem they've had is that they're not always sure about who to go to for their solutions. I think that's probably one of the biggest problems. Like, where we've diversified, even in our own business, where we started 10 years ago, is different to where we're at now. And we offer so many more solutions because brands are like, look, you know, for example, we have a massive QSR sponsor, or we have a streaming service. They have very different goals. Like, one is about driving people in store or into their app to purchase. Another one is like they want to grab people's attention. They're a content producer themselves. So how do they use gaming for different vertical, like different objectives? And it's not a one size fits all. So building that understanding and then having people who are experienced in disseminating and then also coming up with the right ideas for that audience. It takes a lot, and brands can kind of see that as daunting, but what they're now looking at it is going, well, is this something we've got to do? Let's just give it a bit of a go. Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's some brands that are just doing are pushing the boundaries. And I say like a couple of the brands that I really just love their initiative in it was like Louis Vuitton and also like Gucci, that these two really high-end fashion brands that stepped into the arena and they looked at it in a big way. They didn't just do it where it's like, oh, we're just going to test to see how this goes, which makes sense for a brand like them. Putting a partnership with Louis Vuitton, they did a partnership with League of Legends, and they custom created their own products and then also created other products within the game, which is creating that mix of digital identity and physical identity and merging them together. And that's a really powerful way to engage your consumers. I think they've done it really well. I mean, I will say, and this is probably like not to just toot the own horns, but like McDonald's has been such a challenger brand in terms of years ago, people would have said, "Oh, no way would McDonald's want to work in gaming space because of perception things." Now people say, "Oh, it makes sense that they'd want to do that," but it was actually the opposite, and that they just had the initiative to step outside of that, and they've done it in multiple markets. They've done it in Scandinavia, here in Australia. They've done it in North America as well, and of different parts of Europe. Like it's impressive to watch those kinds of brands do it and then do it quite authentically. And I think that's the ones that we've looked at. There's been a lot of different brands that have put things out there as a bit of showcasing, and I probably shouldn't shame with them, name and shame. And that hasn't really worked so super well for them. But yeah, we like the ones where brands are doing it a lot more authentic. And it's pushing game publishers to get creative. Like Diablo has just put out a fashion campaign as well. They put there for Diablo 4 launch, they put some people on the runway with like Diablo fashion. And I don't think that would have ever come about if Louis Vuitton and Gucci and those kinds of brands weren't already pushing into that sector. So it's interesting to watch now brands leading the gaming sector into what ways that they can then communicate with audiences. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah, well, without giving away too much, no. With what we're looking at, I think there's going to be one is how a brand authentically speaks. And I know that word is kind of used too much in media. Trust me, I've heard it as much as the people listening, and it cringe just as much usually when we hear that. But when I say authentically, I don't just mean in terms of the way that you communicate to an audience. So just pandering to them, which is definitely something that you need to understand, is like the brands that can speak the language, so they understand why gamers are in the sphere that they are. If you're dealing with an influencer, or if you're dealing with a eSports league, or you're working with a game publisher, there's a reason that this audience is there and they're so passionate. You've got to be talking within that same reason, within that same passion, but also be authentic to your own brand. I think one of the biggest things is that they're like, gamers haven't seen any advertising before, which, some of them haven't. But for example, it's like, speak to what your brand is an offering. They're just audience. Gamers is everybody. People want to understand what the benefit is they're getting from their brand. But you will see a bit of a divergence, I think, in the next year from, say, where it was very one-dimensional campaigns within gaming. So people just slapping a logo on things, or just looking at saying like, oh, hey, we're just going to be an enabler. I think what you're going to start to see now is brands are starting to really launch their own platforms in terms of with gaming, and then they're going to start to really cement what communities that they want to be part of. I'm just hoping that a lot of them get good advice so they pick the right communities. So